Okay, hello. Today we are doing a simple HackerRank problem called Staircase, and we will be using Haskell programming language to solve this problem. So it's a very simple problem. We are given a single integer, for example 4, and we need to print this staircase to the standard output. So in this case, n is 4, so you have 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and depending on what the input is, that basically decides how big your stack is going to be. So there's another example over here. So if the input is 6, then you have a larger staircase with 6 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And n is between 0 and 100, so it's not too large, so we don't have to worry too much about efficiency. Okay, let's see how we can do this in Haskell. I've chosen Haskell over here in HackerRank, and it's given me this this template. I don't like this, so I'm just gonna delete this. And yeah, let's use our editor here to start with the problem. So I'm gonna first write a function which takes an integer and returns a list of string. Why a list of string? Because see, this input is an integer, and we want a list of lines, right? And each line is a string. So I'm thinking my function would just return each of these lines as a string in a list of strings, and then I can just output that. Okay, so we are given n, which is our input number. Now what we need to do is, maybe I can show it in some comments here. What we need to do is, so the first line has a bunch of spaces and has a hash in the end, right? And then the second line has 2 hashes like this, and then the third line has 3 hashes. So and then the last line has like all hashes and no spaces, right? So this is line number 1, line number 2, line number 3, and so on. So we can basically have a list of integers going from 1 until n, and then for each of those integers we can just map the integer to the required line. So the way one way we can do that is, okay, so we start with a list, right? 1 until n, and then I want to map it as I said. So my map function, it's going to take, so I is an integer from this list. What I want is, I want I hash marks and a bunch of spaces. I think it's gonna be easier if we start the lines with hash, and then we can reverse each line later. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use replicate function. Replicate function takes so you can see the type signature over here. Replicate takes an integer and an element a, and then returns a list of a's. So if you give, basically it will put this element this many times in this list. So if you do replicate, so we can maybe show an example in GSCI over here. If I do replicate 3 and if do let's say a, so it's gonna return a list with 3 a's, right? So we're gonna replicate I times hash mark, right? So this is gonna give us I hash marks, or hash characters, and rest of the string is just spaces. So I can add to this list or concatenate to this list lots of spaces. Now how many spaces? So for each line, the number of spaces is going to change. It's going to reduce by 1. So either we can calculate the exact number of spaces we need for each line, or we can just use Haskell's laziness and attach lots of spaces. So here I've used repeat function. Repeat function takes an element and returns a list, and this returns an infinite list. So this list basically will keep producing the same element over and over again. But because Haskell is lazy, that's fine. So it will only evaluate as many elements as we actually need, and it's just gonna discard everything else. So yeah, so what I'm doing is replicating hash I times and then concatenating lots of spaces to this line, right? Now, next thing we need to do is for each line we want to basically trim it, because each line, so if you see the output here, each line is a set number of characters, and it's basically this many characters, the input. So if the input is 6, it's 6 characters per line. So right now we have in Haskell we have each all of these lines just reverse, so like they start with hashtag instead of starting with spaces, and they continue forever because we are concatenating a repeated list to each line. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, for each line, I'm just going to take the first n characters or n elements from it. So we can do that with take function. So we have to map again, and we can do take n. So we take n times. Now all of these infinitely long lines are now n characters long. And remember, we started with our lines are starting with hashtag. So we're gonna reverse each line now. So I can just use this map function to also reverse each line. Okay, yeah, so let's see in GSCI if this function does what we think it should do. So I'm just going to load this file. Okay, it did not compile because I need application in the end, not composition. Okay, so it compiled, and I'm just going to run it. So let's run it 3 times. So see, it returned a list with 3 elements, and the first element has 1 hash, second has 2 hashtags, and the third one has 3. And the first one has 2 spaces, the second one has 1 space, and the third one does not have any spaces. So that looks correct. And now I'm just going to write a main function. So see, in HackerRank we have to read this input from standard input, and we have to print our output to standard output as well. Haskell has a very helpful function to do this. It's called interact. So interact function, you can see the signature over here. It takes a function that takes a string and outputs a string, and then it returns an IO computation. So it does some IO using this function. So basically what it does, interact is going to read whatever is on the standard input as a string. It's going to apply this function to that string, and whatever this function produces as the output, it's going to print to std out. So that's exactly what we need for HackerRank problems. So I'm just going to give interact a function, and the function. So first of all, we have this will be read as a string, right? And our function f does not take string; it takes int. So I need to first use the read function to convert the string to an integer. Read is just a parsing function that can parse to a lot of different things. So in our case, it's going to parse a string to an integer, to an int, sorry. So I read, and then because I've read as an integer, or read an integer from stdin, I can now directly apply f function. So I just apply f. So this gives us a list of strings, and remember, interact requires a string, not a list of string. So because our list of strings are basically just lines that we want to output to std out, I can just use onLines function to convert list of string into a single string, and then interact will just output it to std out. So we can try this. We can try what we are passing to interact in GHCI. So I'm just gonna paste it, and then I can apply it to some numbers. So for example, they've given this 6 as sample input over here. I'm just gonna put that in here. Okay, that failed. Oh no, it did not fail. Yeah, it did print the output over here. So see, it printed 6 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that's exactly what we want. We can test an edge case. So if this is 0, In this case, this n would be 0, so this list will have 0 elements, so this is going to turn an empty string, and unlines for empty string is just an empty string. So that's yeah, that's what we want. So yeah, I think we can now just paste this on HackerRank. So HackerRank had this weird, really long template, so I'm just going to delete it. It's just not elegant. We have put in our solution in here. It's a few lines, and we can hit run code. Let's see if it works. Okay, it says congratulations, it did work. I'm just gonna now submit and we'll see if it works. Yeah, so everything passed. So this basically demonstrates how beautiful Haskell can be. It's almost a one-liner solution, and then some glue code to read and write, read from std and write to std out. Okay, in future we'll be doing many more problems, so stay tuned. Bye.